The silence of a $9 million villa on the Malibu cliffs was a special kind of empty for Lauren Whitaker. It was a cavern of glittering ice. That night, the only sound was the ragged, painful breathing of her 6-month-old daughter, Emery, and the echo of her husband's parting words. He had stood by the door, dressed in a Zegna suit that cost more than her parents' home, his handsome face marred by impatience. She had begged him not to go. "Not tonight. She's burning up, Miles," she'd pleaded. He just adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes as cold as the marble beneath her bare feet. "It's just a baby. You'll be fine." He'd said it, dismissing her terror, dismissing their daughter. Then he left, the door clicking shut on his way to his mistress, leaving Lauren alone in their golden cage with a sick child and a shattered heart. She thought that was the worst night of her life. She was wrong. The next morning his boss called, and the real nightmare began. Lauren once believed she was living a fairy tale. She'd met Miles Whitaker at a charity gala, a whirlwind romance that felt ripped from the pages of a glossy magazine. He was the golden boy of Whitaker and Sloan Capital, a rising star in Los Angeles' unforgiving finance world. He was charming, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He had pursued her with a single-minded intensity that left her breathless. He loved her intelligence, he said, her sharp wit, her quiet strength. He'd convinced her to put her promising career in forensic accounting on hold. "I'll build an empire for us, Lauren," he'd whispered against her hair. "You just have to be by my side." And for a while, it was perfect. The cliffside villa with its panoramic ocean views, the couture gowns, the weekend escapes to Bora Bora on a private jet. It was a life of impossible privilege. When their daughter Emery was born, Lauren thought her world was complete. She had the perfect husband, the perfect baby, the perfect life. But perfection, she was learning, was a fragile veneer. The cracks began to show, slowly. The late nights at the office became more frequent, the business trips, extended without explanation. A new scent, sickeningly sweet perfume that wasn't hers, clung to his shirts. When she gently questioned him, he flipped it back on her. "It's the stress of the Sloan merger," he said. A massive, career-defining deal, one he was spearheading. He accused her of being needy, of not understanding the pressure he was under. He made her feel small, her concerns petty. Tonight, the veneer hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. Emery had been fussy all day. Her usual happy gurgles replaced by weak, painful cries. By evening, her temperature was climbing. Lauren had called the pediatrician, who advised a lukewarm bath and careful monitoring, warning her to go to the emergency room if the fever surpassed 104°F. A wall of fear, cold and sharp, had coiled in her gut. She was a new mother, and the responsibility felt immense, terrifying. Miles came home just after 8, striding into the villa, already shrugging out of his work jacket and into a fresh one for his evening out. "You can't go," Lauren had said, her voice trembling slightly. She held Emery close, her small body radiating a frightening heat against her chest. "She's sick, Miles? Really sick? Her fever's 103. Miles barely glanced at them. He was texting, his phone aglow with a soft light and a small, self-satisfied smirk on his face. She knew he was texting. Sienna, the impossibly young, impossibly blonde junior publicist from a competing firm. Lauren had seen her name flash on his screen more than once. "She'll be fine," Miles said, his tone dismissive. "Babies get fevers, it's what they do. The doctor said we need to watch her. I'm scared. What if it gets worse? I need you here." Her plea was raw, stripped of all pride. He finally looked at her, and his expression was one of genuine annoyance. It was the look of a man whose evening plans were being threatened by a trivial inconvenience. "Lauren, don't be so dramatic. I have an important dinner. It's for the merger. It's business. Business." She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Your business is named Sienna, isn't it?" His face hardened. The mask of the charming husband fell away, revealing the cold, ruthless man beneath. "My business is none of your concern. Your job is to handle this." He gestured vaguely toward the whimpering baby in her arms. "It's just a baby. You'll be fine." The words hit her harder than a physical blow. It's just a baby. Her entire world, the tiny, perfect human she had created, reduced to an inconvenience. "You'll be fine." An order, not an assurance. "Please, Miles," she whispered one last time, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't leave me alone tonight." He didn't respond. He simply walked to the door, opened it, and left. The heavy, soundproof door clicked shut, sealing her inside the silent, opulent prison he had built for her. The silence was deafening, broken only by Emery's labored breaths. Lauren sank onto the plush white sofa, pulling her sick child tighter, and for the first time in her marriage, she felt a profound, bottomless hatred for the man she had promised to love forever. She was alone, and the long, terrifying night was just beginning. The hours after Miles left bled into a nightmarish crawl. The cliffside villa, usually a symbol of success and security, felt like a vacant museum. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into something menacing. Lauren's world shrank to the small, hot body in her arms, the digital display of the thermometer, and the frantic pounding of her heart. She gave Emery the lukewarm bath, as the pediatrician had instructed. The baby cried weakly, her little limbs limp in the water. Lauren dried her gently with a soft towel, dressed her in a light onesie, and tried to feed her some formula. But Emery turned her head away with a pained whimper. Her fever held steady at 103.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Around midnight, a wave of pure panic washed over Lauren. What if she was missing something? What if this wasn't just a simple fever? Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical from her accounting days, was now fogged with exhaustion and fear. She tried calling Miles. The first time it rang and rang before going to voicemail. "You've reached Miles Whitaker. I'm unavailable right now, but your call is important to me. Leave a message." A lie. Her call was clearly not important to him. She tried again 10 minutes later. This time it went straight to voicemail. He had either turned his phone off or blocked her number. The realization was a fresh stab of pain. He was with Sienna, laughing, drinking, wrapped up in a world where she and their sick daughter didn't exist. She imagined them at some chic West Hollywood restaurant, his hand on her back, his charming smile meant for someone else. The image fueled a cold, hard anger that began to solidify over her fear. At 2:15 a.m., the nightmare intensified. Emery let out a sharp, piercing cry that jolted Lauren from a half-doze on the nursery floor. She scrambled to the crib. Emery was shaking. Her eyes rolled back slightly, her small body convulsed. A febrile seizure. The pediatrician had mentioned it as a possibility, a rare but terrifying side effect of a rapidly spiking fever. "Oh God, no. No, no," Lauren chanted, scooping Emery up. Her body was stiff, her back arched. It only lasted for 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then she went limp in Lauren's arms. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. Lauren didn't hesitate. She grabbed the diaper bag, her purse, and her keys, wrapping Emery in the thickest blanket she could find. She didn't even bother changing out of her tear-stained silk pajamas as she rushed through the living room. Her vision blurred with panic. Every heartbeat a thunderclap in her ears. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, the distance between her and the front door warping in the surreal terror of the moment. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios, terrifying memories of medical reports she'd read in a past life, long before motherhood made them personal. She fumbled for her phone to call an Uber, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock the screen. Her gaze fell on Miles's home office, the door slightly ajar. A single lamp was on, illuminating the mess on his mahogany desk. For a fleeting second, she felt a surge of rage, so potent it nearly buckled her knees. He was out with his mistress, while his daughter had a seizure. The injustice of it was a physical weight. Her eyes caught on a stack of papers near his laptop. On top was a file labeled Sloan IAC Project, Nightingale. Nightingale, it sounded so delicate, so innocent. Beneath it, she saw ledgers and bank statements for a holding company she'd never heard of, Nightingale Holdings LLC. In her pre-marriage life, she had spent years untangling corporate structures just like this. Even in her panicked state, her old instincts flared. Something felt off. Her breath hitched, half fury, half disbelief. How could he be out there, charming someone over wine and lies, while secrets piled on this desk like landmines and his daughter burned with fever upstairs? The betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. It was abandonment in its most primal, unforgivable form. But there was no time. Emery whimpered again, a sound that snapped Lauren back to the horrifying present. She raced out of the house. The Uber was waiting downstairs. The ride to Cedars-Sinai Hospital was a blur of city lights and silent prayers. At the emergency room, she was just another frantic, pajama-clad mother, clutching her pale baby. The nurses and doctors were swift and professional, whisking Emery away to a pediatric bay. They asked for the father's contact information. "He's unavailable," Lauren said. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. For the next 4 hours, she sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair under harsh fluorescent lights, a lone figure in a sea of other people's private emergencies. They stabilized Emery, brought her fever down with medication, and assured Lauren that febrile seizures, while terrifying, were often not as dangerous as they appeared. She would need to be observed for the rest of the night. As the first gray hints of dawn broke over Los Angeles, Lauren sat by Emery's hospital crib, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in 12 hours. The fear had subsided, replaced by an exhaustion so deep it felt bone deep. But beneath the exhaustion was something else, something new and unyielding. It was a cold, quiet resolve. The love she'd once had for Miles, eroded over months of neglect, had been burned away completely. In the crucible of this one night, she looked at her beautiful, vulnerable daughter and knew with absolute certainty that she would never, ever depend on Emery's father for anything again. The fairy tale was over. The cage was unlocked, and she was about to walk out. Dawn in a hospital is a sterile, hopeful thing. The sky outside the window shifted from bruised purple to a soft, promising gray. Emery was finally sleeping soundly, her temperature a stable 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. A nurse had brought Lauren a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, but she cradled it in her hands as if it were a lifeline. The cup's warmth seeped into her fingers, grounding her when everything else felt like it might float away. She watched the rhythmic rise and fall of Emery's chest, and for a fleeting moment, the world outside the hospital walls ceased to exist. Nothing else mattered. Not the betrayal, not the loneliness. Only that small miracle wrapped in a faded pink blanket. The adrenaline from the night had worn off, leaving behind a hollowed-out calm. She had survived. More importantly, Emery had. She checked her phone. Still no messages from Miles. Not a single missed call. It was almost 7:30 a.m. He was likely still asleep, probably in Sienna's bed, oblivious to the terror his family had endured. The silence of her phone felt louder than any words he could have spoken. There was no explanation, no apology, no guilt, just silence. The thought didn't even spark anger anymore, just a profound, empty disappointment. It was confirmation of a truth she had long tried to deny. She was utterly alone in her marriage. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over her lawyer's name. It was time. There was nothing left to salvage. She was composing a text message, the words "I need to file for divorce" stark on the screen, when her phone began to ring. The screen lit up with a name she didn't expect. Victor Sloan. Victor Sloan was the senior partner of Whitaker & Sloan Capital. He was a legend on the West Coast finance circuit, an old-money patriarch in his late 60s, with a reputation for ruthless business acumen and unshakable personal integrity. Lauren had only met him a few times at formal company events. He was always polite, but distant. His piercing gray eyes seemed to see more than you ever wanted them to. He was Miles's boss, his mentor. Why would he be calling her personal cell phone at 7:30 in the morning? Her first thought was that something had happened to Miles, an accident. A part of her, a vestige of the woman who had once loved him, felt a flicker of alarm. She answered, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Hello? Lauren, it's Victor Sloan. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." His voice was deep and grave, exactly as she remembered it, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that set her on edge. "Mr. Sloan, no, it's all right? Is everything okay? Is Miles with you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No. He is not, and that's part of the reason I'm calling. I was trying to reach him all night. His phone is off. Do you happen to know where he is?" The question was a loaded one. Lauren's mind raced. Should she cover for him? The instinct, born from years of being a supportive wife, was to say he was tied up, to protect their image. But the image was a lie, and she was done upholding it. She took a breath, the cold hospital air steadying her. "No, Mr. Sloan. I don't. He told me he had an important business dinner last night and left around 8:30 p.m. I haven't heard from him since." She chose her words carefully, omitting the part about Sienna, sticking only to the indisputable facts. Another pause, longer this time. She could hear the faint sound of papers rustling. "A business dinner," Mr. Sloan repeated, his tone laced with something she couldn't quite place. Disbelief? Concern? Lauren, there was no company dinner last night. The final signing for the merger isn't until tomorrow morning. Last night was the last chance for due diligence. Miles was supposed to be in the office, running the final numbers. He's missed a critical deadline. Lauren's blood ran cold. He hadn't just lied to her about Sienna. He had lied about work, jeopardizing the biggest deal of his career. The deal he had used as an excuse for months of distance, coldness, and neglect. I didn't know, she stammered, a strange sense of vertigo washing over her. I'm aware, Mr. Sloan said. His voice softened slightly, becoming almost paternal. Lauren, the reason I'm calling isn't just to find my errant senior VP. I'm calling because I believe you may be in a position to help me with a delicate corporate matter. A matter that involves your husband directly. Her mind flashed back to the file on Miles's desk. Project Nightingale. The strange holding company. The ledgers. The pieces started to click together, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Her training, dormant for years, kicked in. Shell corporations, missed deadlines, a boss calling the wife. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was something much bigger, much more dangerous. What kind of matter, she asked, her voice now steady, the fatigue replaced by a sharp, focused alertness. It's not something I can discuss over the phone, he replied. I know this is highly unusual, Victor Sloan said, but would it be possible for you to meet with me this morning? As soon as possible? My car can be wherever you are in 20 minutes. Lauren looked at Emery, sleeping peacefully in her little hospital bed. She was safe. Now she was Lauren's priority. But protecting her also meant securing their future, a future now inextricably linked to whatever Miles had done. She had to know. I'm at Cedars-Sinai Hospital with my daughter, she said, her voice firm. But she's stable. Give me an hour. Send the car. Where are we meeting? Not the office, he said quickly, too quickly. Too many eyes and ears. There's a private suite at the Havenwood. I'll text you the details. Lauren, thank you. You might be the only person who can help untangle this. He hung up. Lauren stared at her phone, the screen now dark. Her fingers remained curled around it, knuckles white, the silence of the hospital room pressing down like a weight. The call echoed in her mind, each word carving a deeper line between the life she had and the truth she was about to step into. Her world had tilted on its axis. Last night, she was a wronged wife, a scared mother. This morning, she was something else entirely. She was a woman with a choice, standing at the edge of a conspiracy she was just beginning to understand. The call wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The Havenwood Hotel was an icon of discreet, old-world luxury, a world away from the sterile reality of the hospital. A black town car, sent by Mr. Sloan, had whisked her from Cedars-Sinai to the hotel's private entrance. She had convinced a kind nurse to watch over Emery for a couple of hours, promising she'd be back before her daughter even woke up. Dressed in borrowed scrubs from the hospital's supply closet, the only clean clothes available, she felt utterly out of place walking across the marble lobby. Every polished surface, every whispered greeting from the staff, only deepened her sense of dissonance. It was like walking into a play where she hadn't read the script, yet she knew she had a leading role to perform. Victor Sloan was waiting for her in a penthouse suite overlooking the city, a view not unlike her own villas, but from a different, more somber angle. He wasn't the intimidating corporate titan she remembered. He was a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Dressed in a simple gray suit, his tie loosened, he greeted her not with a handshake but with a concerned look. Lauren, thank you for coming. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you, she said, sinking into an armchair that was probably worth more than her entire college tuition. He poured her a cup himself, his movements slow and deliberate. First, Victor Sloan said, his piercing gray eyes meeting hers, how is your daughter? The genuine concern in his voice almost undid her. She's fine. She'll be fine, Lauren replied. It was a febrile seizure, but the doctors say she's recovered well. Sloan nodded, a grim look settling on his face. I'm truly sorry you had to go through that alone. Miles should have been there. It wasn't an accusation, just a simple statement of fact. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment before getting to the point. He opened a leather-bound folder on the coffee table between them. Lauren, when we brought Miles on as a partner track VP, we did a thorough background check on him. And on you. Lauren stiffened. On me? Of course, he said calmly. The spouse of a key executive is part of the package. We need to know there are no liabilities. He paused. Your file, frankly, was more impressive than his. That first in your class at Wharton, a rising star in Deloitte's forensic accounting division. You uncovered the Medcore fraud scheme in 2018. The partners there were devastated when you left. She stared at him, stunned. Miles had always downplayed her past career, framing it as a little job she had before her real life began. He'd made her feel like she had been a competent but unremarkable analyst. To hear her accomplishments laid out so plainly by a man like Victor Sloan was jarring. I gave that up, she said quietly. For my family. I know, Sloan said, his gaze unwavering, and Miles knew exactly what he was convincing you to give up. He didn't marry a beautiful socialite, Lauren. He married one of the sharpest financial minds I've ever seen, on paper, and I believe he's been using that fact against you. He pushed a document across the table. It was a flowchart of interconnected companies. At the center was the Sloan acquisition, their main target. Branching off from it were several smaller entities, and there at the bottom was a name that made her breath catch in her throat. Nightingale Holdings, LLC. Project Nightingale, as Miles so poetically named it, Sloan explained, his voice low and intense. It's a ghost, he said. A shell corporation he set up 6 months ago, registered in Delaware, with further ties to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's been using the acquisition as cover. Over the past few months, he's systematically siphoned nearly $15 million from our firm. Lauren felt the blood drain from her face. Embezzlement, she whispered. It was so much worse than she had imagined. How? She asked, her analytical mind already racing through the possibilities. By creating fraudulent invoices for consulting services and due diligence expenses related to the acquisition, Sloan continued. The invoices are submitted by Nightingale Holdings and paid out from our accounts. Miles is the one who approves the payments, Sloan continued. He's been cooking the books, burying the expenses within the multi-billion-dollar transaction, hoping no one would notice a few million here and there. But the audit trail, Lauren began, her old instincts taking over. Someone would eventually find it. Exactly, Sloan said, leaning forward. And he has a plan for that too. He's fabricated a digital trail to frame a junior analyst in his department, a young man named Kevin Lin. All the transfers, from a technical standpoint, appear to originate from Kevin's workstation. Miles's plan, we believe, was to let the acquisition close tomorrow, then disappear. By the time our quarterly audit uncovered the discrepancy, he'd be long gone, and an innocent kid would take the fall. The sheer calculated cruelty of it took her breath away. He wasn't just a cheater or a liar, he was a predator. Why are you telling me this? Lauren asked, though she already knew the answer. Because he got sloppy, Sloan said, a flicker of anger in his eyes. Last night was his last chance to clean the slate, to finalize the falsified records before the deal closed. But he wasn't in the office. He was, as you know, otherwise engaged. He left his work computer on, logged into the network. Our IT security flagged an unusual remote login attempt to his files early this morning, from an unauthorized IP address. My CIO woke me up at 4 a.m. We started digging. What we found is damning, but it's incomplete. The final piece of the puzzle, the physical ledger that connects Nightingale Holdings directly to him and his offshore accounts, is not in his office. He paused, his gaze locked with hers. We believe it's in his home office, in your apartment. Lauren's mind flashed again to the desk. The file. That sense that something was wrong. He must have brought it home to work on last night, before Sienna's allure proved too strong. The arrogance of it. To leave evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme lying around his home. You're the only one who can get it, Sloan stated simply, without tipping him off. He's betrayed this company. He's betrayed an innocent employee. And Lauren, he's betrayed you and your daughter in the most profound way possible. I am asking you, not as Miles's wife, but as the brilliant forensic accountant I know you are, to help me. To stop him. The room was silent. Lauren looked out the window at the city. Her city. The life Miles had given her was a lie, funded by theft. The security he promised was a phantom. But her mind, her skills, those instincts were real. He had tried to bury that part of her, but it was still there, sharp and ready. She thought of Emery, sleeping in the hospital. She thought of Miles's cold, dismissive words. "It's just a baby. You'll be fine." She turned back to Victor Sloan. The last vestiges of the frightened, dependent wife were gone forever. In her eyes was a fire he hadn't seen before, but had gambled on finding. "Tell me exactly what you need," she said, "and I'll get it for you." Returning to the villa was one of the hardest things Lauren had ever done. The black car dropped her back at Cedars-Sinai, where she spent a precious hour cuddling a now awake and cheerful Emery, her fever gone, her smile returning. The hospital officially discharged her, and as Lauren held her daughter, she felt a surge of strength. This was for her. The plan she had formulated with Victor Sloan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. She was to return to the house and act as if nothing was wrong, other than being the rightfully upset wife. Her one and only goal: locate and secure the Nightingale ledger, the physical book of records that would be Miles's undoing. Sloan's security team had confirmed Miles's credit card had been used at 4 a.m. for a room at the Marquise Hotel, Sienna's usual haunt. He was still there, likely sleeping off his night of debauchery. This gave Lauren a window. As the elevator ascended to the villa's top level, her heart hammered against her ribs. She was no longer just a wife returning home. She was a Trojan horse, an agent of justice, walking into the heart of the enemy's camp. She unlocked the front door, the familiar click echoing with new meaning. The villa was pristine, silent, cold. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off glass and chrome, illuminating a life that was a complete fabrication. She put a sleeping Emery down in her crib, her movements quiet and deliberate. Then she went to Miles's office. The room was just as she had seen it in her panicked rush hours earlier. The desk was a controlled chaos of files and tech. Her eyes scanned immediately for the ledger. Sloan had described it as a simple black Moleskine notebook, Miles's analog affectation. A place he kept key numbers and transfer codes, believing it was safer than any digital file. It wasn't on the desk. It wasn't on the shelves, lined with leather-bound law books he'd never read. She checked the drawers. The first was full of expensive pens and stationery. The second held personal effects, cufflinks, old photos, a spare watch. The third drawer was locked. Of course. Panic began to prickle at the edges of Lauren's calm. She didn't have a key. Miles kept it on him at all times. She could feel the precious minutes ticking away. She ran her fingers along the edge of the drawer, her mind racing. Every passing second hammered a drumbeat in her chest. The possibility that the elevator might arrive any moment stoked a furnace of anxiety. Her pulse thundered like war drums in her ears. In her old job, she'd learned that corporate criminals were often undone by simple human arrogance and laziness. Miles had both in spades. Where would he hide a key? Not somewhere clever. Somewhere convenient. She looked around the office. Her eyes landed on a heavy, ornate silver picture frame on the desk. It held a photo of her and Miles on their wedding day, smiling, blissfully unaware of the future. The faces in the photo seemed to mock her now, two people frozen in a happier version of love that had long since died. A tear pricked the edge of her eye, but she blinked it away, letting resolve steel her spine. He loved that photo, saw it as a testament to his success. The beautiful wife. The perfect life. With a surge of bitter irony, she picked it up. She felt a slight bulge in the velvet backing. Carefully, she pried the back off. Taped to the inside was a small silver key. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. She pulled the drawer open, and there it was. A plain black Moleskine notebook. She opened it. The pages were filled with Miles's neat, precise handwriting. It was all there: dates, transfer amounts, BICs, and names of offshore banking contacts, cross-referenced with the digital evidence Sloan's team had. This was the smoking gun, the nail in Miles's multi-million-dollar coffin. She took out her phone and with steady hands photographed every single page, creating a digital backup, just as Sloan had instructed. Her heart pounded with a heady mix of triumph and fear. Every photo click echoed her ascent back to power, the power he had tried to steal, and now she was reclaiming it. Then, she tucked the original ledger into the bottom of Emery's diaper bag, hiding it beneath a layer of diapers and baby wipes. No one would ever look there. Just as she slid the empty drawer shut and relocked it, placing the key back in its hiding spot, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. The chime of the private elevator arriving at their floor. He was back. She hadn't expected him this early. Her window had just slammed shut. She raced out of the office, her mind a whirlwind. She had to appear normal. She smoothed her hair, took a deep, shuddering breath, and tried to compose her face into a mask of weary anger, the face of a wife who had been up all night with a sick child. The apartment door opened, and Miles walked in. He looked tired, his expensive suit rumpled. He had the gall to be holding a peace offering, a large coffee from her favorite cafe, and a bag of croissants. "Lauren," he began, his voice attempting a tone of gentle contrition. "Look, I know you're angry. I'm so sorry about last night. Things with the deal got out of hand. I should have called." She stared at him, at his handsome lying face. She thought of Emery's seizure, of her own terror in the hospital, of the innocent Kevin Lynn who was about to have his life ruined. She thought of the ledger hidden not 20 feet away in their daughter's diaper bag. "Out of hand?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You have no idea." He frowned, his practiced apology faltering in the face of her cold fury. "Come on, honey, don't be like this. I was working. For us, for our future." He gestured with the coffee. "I brought you breakfast." Lauren let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. It wasn't even the wrongness of the gesture. It was how predictable it was. A peace offering rooted in routine, in denial, in the assumption that she was still the woman he could smooth over with caffeine and sugar. "You think a croissant fixes this, Miles? You think you can just walk back in here and fix everything with breakfast?" This was the moment. The plan was for her to leave the house with Emery and the bag, and meet Sloane's contact downstairs. But Miles was here now, blocking her path, trying to placate her with pathetic gestures. She had to play her part perfectly. "Where's Emery?" he asked, a flicker of what might have been genuine concern in his eyes. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," Lauren said, her voice like ice. "No thanks to you. We spent the night at Cedars-Sinai. She had a seizure." The color drained from his face. "What? A seizure? Why didn't you call me?" "I tried," she said, letting all the bitterness of the night pour into her words. "Your phone was off. You were too busy with your business dinner." He looked genuinely shaken, a crack in his armor of arrogance. "Lauren? I didn't know, I swear." But the apology was too small, too late, lost in the shadow of everything he had already broken. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said, walking over to the diaper bag and slinging it over her shoulder. She moved toward the nursery. "I'm taking Emery to my mother's for a few days. I can't even look at you right now." It was the perfect excuse. He would see it as a wife needing space, not as a woman carrying the evidence that would destroy him. "Wait, Lauren, let's just talk about this," he pleaded, following her. She picked up her sleeping daughter from the crib, the weight of Emery a comforting anchor in the storm. "There's nothing to talk about, Miles," Lauren said, turning to face him, her eyes hard as diamonds. "You made your choice last night. Now I'm making mine." She walked past him, heading for the door, the diaper bag containing his doom slung over her shoulder. The fate of millions of dollars and multiple lives was hidden between the diapers and the desitin, and the architect of the crime had no idea. He had just been checkmated. The air in the villa was thick with tension that felt physically suffocating. Miles, for the first time since she'd known him, looked completely wrong-footed. Her cold fury was something he couldn't charm, bully, or buy his way out of. He saw his control slipping, and it made him desperate. "Don't walk away from me, Lauren," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge as he followed her to the foyer. He moved to block the door. "We are not doing this. You are not taking my daughter and running off to your mother's." "My daughter." The possessive pronoun, after a night of utter abandonment, was so audacious it almost made her laugh. Lauren held Emery tighter and faced him down. "Get out of my way, Miles." "No," he said, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "You've had your little tantrum. You made your point. I screwed up. I'll buy you a new piece of jewelry. We'll go to Paris. Just stop being so hysterical." It was his fatal mistake, the condescension, the belief that she could be bought, that her legitimate pain was mere hysteria. It solidified her resolve into something unbreakable. "It's over, Miles," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "And not just because of Sienna. Not just because you left your daughter when she was sick. It's over because of Project Nightingale." The name hit him like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, pale shock. The arrogant posture collapsed, and for a fleeting second, she saw pure animal panic in his eyes. What did you just say?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Nightingale Holdings LLC," she continued, pressing her advantage. "The fraudulent invoices, the $15 million you siphoned from your own company, the plan to frame Kevin Lynn for your crimes. Did you really think you were smart enough to pull it off? Did you really think I was stupid enough to never find out?" He stared at her, his mind clearly racing, trying to figure out how she could possibly know. He glanced frantically toward his office. "You went in my office. You went through my things." It wasn't a question. It was a horrified accusation. "You left the evidence of your fraud in a house with a forensic accountant, Miles," Lauren retorted. "That's not me being clever. That's you being an arrogant, sloppy fool." His panic began to morph into rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled, taking a step toward her. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" she said calmly. She adjusted the diaper bag on her shoulder, patting it lightly. "It's amazing what you can fit in one of these. Diapers, wipes, a pacifier, and a little black moleskine notebook that details every single illegal transfer you've ever made." His eyes darted to the bag, and then back to her face, a look of complete and utter disbelief dawning. He lunged for the bag. "Give me that." Lauren sidestepped him, her heart leaping into her throat. This was the moment she had feared, but just as he reached for her, a sharp, authoritative rap echoed from the front door. Miles froze. They both stared at the door. "Who is that?" he hissed, his eyes wide with fear. "I imagine," Lauren said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her, "that it's your boss, and perhaps a few of his friends." On cue, a key turned in the lock. A master override key that only building security and apparently Victor Sloan had access to. The door swung open. Victor Sloan stood there, flanked by two stern-looking men in dark suits, who were clearly not corporate lawyers. Behind them stood two uniformed LAPD officers. Sloan's eyes fell first on Lauren and a sleeping Emery, his expression softening with relief. Then his gaze shifted to Miles, and it turned to stone. "Miles," Sloan said, his voice booming with cold authority in the silent foyer, "your little project is over." Miles looked from Sloan to the officers, his face a mask of crumbling bravado. He was trapped. He turned his desperate, furious gaze back to Lauren. "You did this," he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "You, my own wife." "You stopped being my husband last night," Lauren replied, her voice clear and strong, "when you walked out that door. You said, 'It's just a baby, you'll be fine.' Well, Emery is fine, and I am more than fine. I am free." One of the detectives stepped forward. "Miles Kavanaugh, you are under arrest for suspicion of grand larceny, embezzlement, and wire fraud." As the officer began to read him his Miranda rights, Miles's facade finally shattered completely. The charming millionaire, the financial titan, vanished. In his place was a common criminal, cornered and pathetic. He didn't resist as they cuffed his hands behind his back, his expensive suit now the uniform of a fallen man. They led him out of the villa, past the marble tables and the priceless art he had acquired with stolen money. His last look was at Lauren, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It didn't touch her. She felt nothing but a vast, cleansing relief. Victor Sloan walked over to her. "The car is waiting for you downstairs," he said gently. "My security will escort you wherever you need to go. You and your daughter are safe now." Lauren nodded, tears finally welling in her eyes, not of sadness but of release. "Thank you, Victor." "No, Lauren," he said, looking at her with profound respect. "Thank you. You did the right thing, the brave thing." She looked down at Emery, sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that her entire world had just been irrevocably changed for the better. She had walked into this house a prisoner. Now she was walking out a survivor, her child in her arms and the key to her new life hidden in a diaper bag. The gavel fell in the hushed, wood-paneled courtroom. The sound echoed with a finality that seemed to shake the dust from the air. 6 months to the day after Miles had walked out on his family, his fate was sealed. Lauren sat in the back row, a lone figure in a simple navy dress, having slipped in unnoticed after the proceedings began. She hadn't come for revenge or spectacle. She had come for closure, to witness the final, definitive end of the life she had escaped. Miles stood before the judge, a shadow of the man he once was. The impeccable Tom Ford suits were gone, replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His charismatic confidence had evaporated, leaving behind only shallow, bitter resentment. When the judge sentenced him to a term of 7 to 10 years in a federal correctional institution, he didn't flinch. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. But as they led him away, his eyes scanned the gallery and found hers. For a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she married, a desperate, pleading look. But it was immediately swallowed by the now familiar, venomous hatred. Lauren met his gaze without malice, her expression one of serene, sorrowful finality. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the ghost of Miles Kavanaugh to fade into the annals of courtroom history. Her new life hadn't begun today. It had begun the moment she walked out of that villa. The weeks following Miles's arrest had been a whirlwind of methodical dismantling. She'd hired movers, not to pack but to help her sort. She walked through the cavernous closets filled with couture gowns and designer shoes, touching the fabrics that had once felt like costumes for a role she'd been playing. She left them all behind, along with the glittering jewels and extravagant gifts he had used to gild her. They were artifacts of a life that wasn't hers, paid for with stolen money and lies. She packed only her books, Emery's belongings, personal photos from before her marriage, and a few simple outfits. As she stood in the empty living room for the last time, the sunlight glinting off the bare marble floors, she felt not loss, but a profound lightness. As if she had shed a heavy, suffocating skin. She and Emery stayed with her mother in Santa Barbara for a month. It was a time of healing and quiet rebuilding. Her mother, a practical woman who had always viewed Miles with a healthy dose of skepticism, didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she simply made tea, held Emery while Lauren cried the last of her tears, and offered the steady, unspoken support that Lauren desperately needed. "That man built you a palace, honey," her mother said one evening as they watched the sunset from the back porch. "But he forgot to give you the key. You were always meant to build your own house." The call from Victor Sloan came during that time, and the job offer felt less like a lifeline and more like a homecoming. Her first day at Sloan Capital was daunting. Whispers followed her down the hall. She was the scorned wife, the whistleblower. But that changed the moment she stepped into her first board meeting, armed with a comprehensive plan to overhaul the firm's risk management protocols. She spoke with a clarity and authority that silenced all speculation. She wasn't Miles Kavanaugh's ex-wife. She was Lauren Hart. She had taken back her maiden name, a formidable professional with an unparalleled mind for numbers and an unshakable ethical compass. Her greatest satisfaction came from mentoring her new team, especially a young, brilliant analyst named Kevin Lynn. He'd been quiet and timid at first, still shaken from being the designated scapegoat in Miles's scheme. One afternoon, he stopped by her office. "Miss Hart," he began, fidgeting with a report, "I just wanted to thank you. You didn't just save my career. You saved my family's reputation, my future. If there's ever anything I can do." Lauren offered him a warm smile. "You're already doing it, Kevin. Your work on the quarterly projections was outstanding. Just keep doing what you're doing. Integrity and hard work are the only currency that matters in the end. Let that be the lesson from all of this." Kevin nodded, a new confidence in his eyes. That look, the steadiness in his voice, the gratitude, meant more to Lauren than he would ever know. It was a sign that the rot Miles had tried to plant hadn't spread, that there was still good to nurture and protect in the space he'd corrupted. In helping him, Lauren felt she was actively repairing the damage Miles had left in his wake, turning his destructive legacy into something positive. Now, home was a 3-story brownstone on a leafy street in Pasadena. She'd bought it with the clean money from her divorce settlement and the signing bonus from her new job. It had high ceilings, a small garden out back, and a beautiful bay window in the living room that was perfect for reading stories to an increasingly active Emery. The silence here wasn't the cold, empty silence of the villa. It was the warm, peaceful quiet of a home filled with love, punctuated by the happy squeals and babbling of her daughter, who was now taking her first wobbly steps. Those steps were more than developmental milestones. They were daily affirmations. Each unsteady stride a symbol of resilience, a quiet reminder that forward was the only direction they would go from here. Some days, she took the metro to work, anonymous in the bustling morning crowd, and felt more powerful than she ever had in the back of a chauffeured town car. Her life was her own. Every small piece of it earned and cherished. She even saw an article online one day about Sienna, who had attempted to rebrand herself as a wellness influencer. The comment section was a brutal reminder that the internet never forgets, and her career pivot quickly fizzled out. Lauren felt a brief, detached pity for the girl before closing the tab. Sienna was a ghost from a different life, irrelevant to her new reality. This evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lauren sat on the floor of her living room stacking blocks with emery. She clapped her hands in delight as the tower grew, then knocked it down with a gleeful shriek. Her laughter was the only music Lauren needed. She thought back to Miles's cruel, dismissive words, the ones that had been the catalyst for her transformation. "It's just a baby, you'll be fine." He had been so spectacularly wrong. Emery wasn't an inconvenience. She was her anchor, her motivation, her North Star. And Lauren wasn't just fine. She was whole. She was happy. She was free. She had faced down the millionaire, the manipulator, the monster who lived in the gilded cage, and had discovered that the key was inside her all along. It hadn't been easy. There were moments she doubted herself, nights when fear crept in through the quiet, and mornings when the weight of starting over felt too heavy to lift. But she did it. Not all at once, but inch by determined inch. Looking at her daughter, her beautiful, thriving girl, she knew she hadn't just built her own house. She had built her own world, and it was magnificent. There were no walls of silence here, no ceilings of compromise, just space, real, sacred space, for joy, for growth, for truth. And so Lauren Hart closed the chapter on a life that had been built on lies, and opened a new one, written in her own ink. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a cheating criminal husband. It's a powerful testament to the hidden strength that lies within us, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It's a reminder that the most gilded cages are still cages, and that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in integrity, courage, and the freedom to build a life on your own terms. She didn't just get revenge, she reclaimed her identity, her career, and her future, proving that the most powerful response to betrayal is to build a better life without the person who broke your heart. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here at this hour? If you're still watching, then maybe something in Lauren's story touched your heart. Maybe it echoed something you've lived, or sparked a hope you'd forgotten you still carried. And if that's true, then let's take a quiet moment together. Just you and me, and look at what it all meant. Lauren's journey reminds us that sometimes the most profound strength isn't loud. It isn't fierce at first. It begins quietly. In a hospital room, in a sleepless night, in the hushed heartbreak of realizing you're alone. And yet that strength can grow. It can become the power to walk away from betrayal, to expose injustice, to rebuild not just a life, but an identity. We are not the lies told to us. We are not the limitations others try to place on us. Like Lauren, we hold the key to our own freedom, often buried beneath fear, self-doubt, or a gilded image of a life we were told we should want. There's a quote by Maya Angelou that comes to mind. "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated." Lauren wasn't defeated. She was betrayed, yes, but she turned pain into power. She didn't just walk away from the cage. She built something beautiful in its place. Let her story be your reminder. You are stronger than your worst night. You are more than someone else's neglect. You are worthy of love that stays, of a life built with intention, of joy that doesn't require permission. And now, if this story resonated with you, if you felt even a flicker of truth or healing, please consider giving this video a like, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing for more stories that don't just entertain, but empower. Your presence here matters. Your heart matters. Until next time, take care of yourself. And never forget, you are not just fine, you are whole.